Alright, so now what we're ready to do is ready to do model 2 for our first project, right? So remember, the first project is actually 2 models, right? It's the night table or end table and the bed. And so this is going to be the bed that's going to, the video that's going to show us how to do the quick cushion, the bed posts, of course, create a free image plane, set up kind of the scene like we did on the earlier videos, kind of using projects. And then what we'll do is we'll have a couple more videos on the next class session, which will be kind of how to make the pillows, the bedspread, the metal railings, and kind of just clean up the scene. So remember, the first thing we really want to do, of course, is we want to go and we want to find reference images. Now, in this case, I've already downloaded this, but I'll kind of remind you and show you this process again. I really am looking for this kind of bed. In fact, I'm going to upload this to the file section of Canvas, right? So that you guys can grab it. I really want there to be some kind of metal railings. They don't have to be too crazy, right? And of course, there has to be a mattress and bedspread and pillows and all that stuff, right? But the biggest things that we're really looking for is some kind of metal railings like this and a bedpost, right? And you'll notice, particularly when you zoom in on this a little bit, the bedpost is actually kind of fairly square on the bottom, and then it gets kind of a ball-like on the top. And that's important because I want to show you guys a tool for doing this, right? So really today we're just going to do the mattress and the bedposts, and then we'll save the railings, the blanket, the pillows for our next videos, right? So this will be a good way to get started on the bed without having to do everything on the bed yet. A lot of it, we'll see some more. We'll see some bevels, we'll see some cubes and some sizing, some mirroring, right? But I am going to show you kind of a new tool today with this. So of course, what you want to do is you need to find a bed. It doesn't have to be exactly this bed, although, like I said, I am going to put this into the references file or in a file section of Canvas so that you can use it, right? If you're having a hard time finding a bed that meets these criteria of kind of having a squarer bedpost with a kind of a spherical knob on top and some metal railings, because you'll notice some beds don't quite have that, right? Then use this one, right? It's not mandatory that you use it, but if you kind of give me a bed like this, no, right? This, you can't have full leeway to say, this is my bed. No, I want to show you guys how to make metal railing. I want to show you guys how to make this kind of ball on top as one solid wood piece with kind of a more boxy shape, right? So no to this. Beds like that, no. Super modern, super clean beds, no, right? This can't be your bed picture, right? You can't do that bed, right? So none of that stuff, right? It's got to be something like this guy. So if you're having a hard time finding something like this one that has the basic requirements, just use this one. I will kind of include it in the file section of Canvas. So of course you can right click and you can save image as. And remember, you want to save it directly into your project folder, right? So you can see here's my project that I've already created from last week. And it's in the source images folder already, so I already kind of saved it there. So just remember that. Those are some of the basic criteria. Now, when we're starting a scene up, remember, we want to go, particularly if it's a new scene, we want to go to File, right? Now, we don't have to create a new project, right? We only have to do that 6 times this semester, and we'll do it 5 more times. But we've already created the project for this one, project 1. We do want to make that our active project in this empty scene, though. So, right, we go to File, Set Project, right? And then, of course, we can find it right here. There's project 1. We'll hit Set. There we go. So you don't open it. You just select the folder and hit Set. And that makes it the active project. So now I want to load an image plane in, right? So I'm going to go to Create. And I'm going to go to Free Image Plane, right? So we did this last week for our end table. So we go to Create Free Image Plane. And what that does is that loads this in. Remember, Alt, right mouse button zooms your camera, right? Alt, right mouse button zooms the camera. Alt left rotates, and Alt middle mouse button, right? The scroll wheel, you press it down like a button though, moves your camera. So Alt left rotates, Alt middle moves, Alt right zooms. But you'll notice that this image plane has been created here, right? So let's just create free image plane. It kind of drops this in. You'll notice you can move, rotate, and scale it, right? W for move, E for rotate, R for scale, and then you can kind of left drag on the little handles to adjust them. But really it's just a green square with a green X in it, right? Remember, you can click off of it to deselect it, but if you click on the edge, it reselects it. Now remember, we want to go over to the kind of sidebars here, right? And now remember, these guys also control this, right? That's your modeling toolkit. That's your attribute editor, which is what we wanted. That one's your channel box layer editor. And we'll get into channel box layer editor a little more as we go on, right? We haven't really talked about that quite that much yet. As we go along, particularly in our next videos for our next class session, we'll talk about this a little bit more. We need to talk about deleting history, what history is a little bit more. But we won't quite get into that until the next videos. We want an attribute editor, which the actual quick key for that is Control A, right? So if you hit Control A, it actually kind of brings that up. It's kind of a toggle for it, right? Control A. So if you're a modeling toolkit or channel box layer, hit Control A, it brings the attribute editor up, right? Attribute editor. And when you're up to there, usually it'll go default image plane shape 1. But just keep in mind, if you're not seeing it, what you're expecting, it might be on image plane 1, right? Image plane shape 1 right up here, little tabs, right? Usually it'll go right to this though. And you'll see there's kind of this area right at the top here, image name folder, right? We click on that folder, and this automatically goes to the source images for project 1 because we set that project, right? When you go file set project, you're making a project active, right? So that way all of your directory stuff points to that project, right? So there is our bed, and we'll hit open, and there we go. Remember, that's the great advantage to projects, right? If you're moving around to different computers, right? Which, since you're working from home, you're probably not going to have to worry about that, but if you're moving around different computers and things like that, well, the great thing about projects is any textures, any reference images that are loaded in, if you've been putting them in the folders, right, that are in the project, and when you kind of browse and open them up in here, the project knows where to find them, right? So that when you open your project and you open your scene, everything's where it's supposed to be. All the textures will load in properly, all the reference images will load in properly because they're all within this kind of self-contained project directory. And when you set a project, Maya knows where to look for all that stuff, right? So that's one of the useful kind of cool things about projects. Now in this case, my grid units aren't set properly. Remember, that's Windows, right? Settings, preferences, right? So Windows, settings, preferences, right? You go in there, and there's a lot of preferences in here. We're not going to go over all of them. Most of the default stuff's fine, right? You can turn off the highlight what's new in this release, so you don't see the little green little bits, right? User interface elements, you can turn off different parts of the interface if you wanted to from there. Display has some options for kind of what to show off on stuff. Usually the defaults for that are fine. If you're working on a really old computer, you might need to change the rendering engine to legacy, right? Because that is one of those things where on older 3D cards, the manipulators won't work, right? And you might need to change to OpenGL legacy. But in the case of OpenGL core profile, if you're working on a pretty new computer with a good 3D card, doesn't have to be a great 3D card, you should be fine with core profile. Manipulators, you can change manipulator size if you want to. Even if it hides manipulators when doing certain things, you can have reposition it in the middle mouse button. So there are kind of some preferences in there. If you want to play with, you can, but usually the defaults are fine. Settings, right, or files projects. Remember, that's where autosave's at, right? If you want to use autosave, it's right there. Lower down, undo. So if you want to turn up your amount of undos, you can. Even selection has things like pre-selection highlighting, which I usually like to have on. Select faces, center, or whole face. There's no reason, unless you're stupid, to use center, to be honest. For a long time, Maya had only that option. You had to select on a little square on the center of a face. Annoying as hell. Whole face is the default because it's better, right? So there are a lot of preferences here. I just want to mention a few more of them if you want to go over those a little bit. But settings is what we wanted, right? This is where you can change your up access, right? 3D Studio Max by default uses Z as up access. Pixar does as well. There's no right or wrong between Y or Z, though. Just depends on what your studio is using. Just like working units doesn't ultimately matter, except that you want to work on the units everybody else is and build a scale. And that's what we really wanted to change here, was that working units from centimeter to meter, right? To meter. And it's good to practice knowing that, right? You want to be on the same units everybody else is working on in your team, which for these projects is just us, but you know. Meters will work for us, so we'll hit save. Now that does mean that each grid unit is now a meter, right? And a meter is 3 feet. Now, when you think about a bed is going to honestly be about 6, 7, maybe 8 feet long, depending on the size of the bed. And it's also probably going to be about 6 foot wide. So realistically, this reference image should be much bigger. It should actually be close to the size of 2 grid units, or actually that size. So in this case, R for scale, right? Remember, they're right here though. Move, rotate, scale. selection, right? That's QWER. And of course, remember, there are these handles, right? You can left click drag on the red to stretch it this way. We don't want to stretch it though. There is that light blue one in the center though, right? If you left click drag on that, that scales all 3 axes at the same time. And so what we can do is we can get this picture to be easily about 2 grid units wide, right? Now, I also don't like my reference images to be in the center of the world, right? Because I'm going to build on the center. That's usually a good habit to have. So I'll hit W for move. And I'm going to move it on the Z-axis, right? That blue one. Now, I don't want to move it forward. If I move it this direction, it's actually going to be in front of the stuff if we went to, say, like our front view. You actually notice, right, that it's actually kind of overriding the grid in front view. So I want to actually move it back. And you notice how it's not overriding the grid? Remember, that's just tap spacebar, right? Tap spacebar, it sends you out to 4 views. Whatever view you put your cursor over, you tap spacebar, maximizes that view. We'll see that more as we do other models and we do things with splines a little bit more. But I always like to move it backward so that it's not on the 0 of the world. Now that actually gives us a pretty good reference image loaded in. Now you notice the reference image is a bit of an angle. Do not model your models at an angle. That's going to make symmetry not work terribly well for us. And granted, we haven't really gotten to symmetry modeling yet. We don't quite need to yet. We will start to see it soon though, right? In fact, I'll probably end up starting to show it to you guys on our next class session when we do the railing. We're really not going to need it so much today though. So we're going to get to it soon, but not quite. But you really want to build your stuff lined up to the world. Your manipulators and symmetry just work better from that perspective. So some level of interpretation is necessary when you have just a single reference image, right? If you can get them from front and side, you can load in multiple, that's fine. But sometimes you only can find one kind of image at an angle. So you have to interpret it, right? We don't want to build it at that angle to meet it. Do not do that. Do not. So in this case, probably the best place to start off with is maybe save the scene as really quick. So I'll go File, Save Scene As. And I'm just going to click on the end table one because we've already got most of the naming convention for that, right? And I'll just delete the part up to _ project 1. And we'll call this bed now, right? Now that's our naming convention, right? That's the naming convention we use for our creating our projects and even our file scenes, right? DA, Intro to 3D Modeling, 240A _ Summer 20, SU20 _ my name, you'll use your name, of course, _ project 1, _ project 1. We do have 2 scenes though for this, right? So this one will be _ bed instead of _ end table. There we go. And now we've got this saved in that project and we have a whole new scene. So you'll notice that kind of the bed is its own asset. The untable is going to be its own asset, right? They're their own models that can have their own scenes. We can actually import scenes into other scenes, which we'll do later in the semester. It's just file import, all right? So there we go. Now in this case, probably the best place to start off is with the mattress, right? And the mattress, really, we just need as kind of a placeholder because the blankets are going to go on it, but that's, you know, it also gives us a frame of reference. Now, when you think about a mattress, what is it? It's basically a slightly rounded, soft rectangle, right? So we're going to go to Create Polygon Primitives Cube, right? Create Polygon Primitives Cube. There we go. Now in this case, of course, it needs to be wider. So we can hit R for scale. And you notice by default, it's creating this on the 0 of the world, right? If you go to Create menu here, Polygon Primitives, and you turn on Interactive Creation, right? So it's on. And you go to Cube, you can just left-click drag, and then kind of left-click drag again. Oh, my God. Let me try it one more time. Create Polygon Primitives, Cube. So we just left-click drag, and then kind of drag up, right? Left-click drag up again. And you see how it's fully interactive? Sometimes you'll want to use that. Sometimes that'll be useful, but more often than not, just having stuff built default on the 0 is better, right? That's one of the reasons why you notice how interactive creation is off by default, right? It's unchecked. But you're still able to create this. You can just kind of interactively kind of draw it where you want to, right? That's off by default because usually you're not going to need it that much, right? It's one of those things that's good to have the option to do it when you need it, but usually just make stuff right on the 0 is better. So in this case, we want to hit R for scale, right? It's right here though. And I'm just going to grab left-click drag on that red square kind of cube, right? Make it a little wider. It also should be less tall, so I'll grab on the green, right, which is the y-axis. Left click drag on that to scale that down a bit. And remember, this is actually kind of some overhang and blankets, kind of the little border kind of fringe, right? So I'll hit W maybe to move it down a little bit. There we go. And it also should be definitely longer. So R for scale, and we'll grab the blue, right? The blue arrow, or blue kind of cube. And that should actually give us, maybe make it a little wider, that should give us a pretty good kind of overall mattress size, right? It's roughly about 2 grid units wide. It's roughly about 2, maybe a little bit more than 2 grid units long, right? And it's not going to be terribly thick, so that'll kind of be a little smaller. But you see, we're still matching that reference image fairly well for that, right? Now in this case, that's all we really need to do with this cube. It's really just, you know, in object mode, right? Green wireframe. Remember, 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded. They are buttons right here, though. Right, there are quick keys for them, 4, 5. And of course, W, E, R for our move, rotate, and scales. And of course, we can grab these handles. And I was in green wireframe, right? If you hold down right mouse button, that's object mode, right? Remember, they are right here, but you really want to be using these, right? They're faster, they're easier. A lot of professionals and the other teachers at Cogswell really want you to use it this way, and quite frankly, I prefer that way myself. Even though there are buttons for it, and you have the buttons also here, right, as well as quick keys. Your other teachers will be happier if you just hold down right mouse button and use your selection mode this way. So in this case, we're in object mode, green wireframe, so we're just scaling the whole object. We're just using the different handles to do that. Of course, W for move, and you can use the different handles to move it along axes. In this case, we're not moving along the red, right? Because we really want to keep it symmetrical on this axis. If you move it up or down, that's fine. If you move it back or forward on the blue, that's fine. But the x-axis, we kind of want to keep zeroed, right? So don't move it on the x-axis in this case. In this case, I want it to be a little more rounded at the corners. And I'm not quite ready to show you how you can use smooth preview sometimes. So in this case, we'll just bevel those edges. Now let's give us more good practice at that, right? So we'll hold down right mouse button. And I'll go to edge, right? So hold down right mouse button, move my cursor, right? You hold down right mouse button, brings this up, and you just move your mouse, right, to edge. And then you'll see that our wireframe goes blue, right? Vertex, edge, or face mode, the wireframe becomes blue, indicating you're in a component selection type. You're selecting components of the whole cube. In this case, edges. Remember, edges are just lines between vertices. Vertices are just points. And faces, or polygons, are actually the quads, triangles, n-gons. They're actually the full polygon. In this case, I'm just going to left-click drag, right? Because remember, by default, pick marquee is your default selection type. So when you hold down your left mouse button and drag, right, it brings up this box, right? And whatever this box touches is what it'll select. In this case, we want to select everything, so we make a box that incorporates all the edges. And of course, we can hit the bevel tool, right? And in this case, the bevel is probably a little bigger than we need it to be, right? But it is beveling those edges. We saw that on our videos last week, right? It takes each edge and it breaks it into 2 edges, moves them away from each other at a 45-degree angle. In this case, though, we want that size to be smaller, and that's our fraction, right? Now, you can left-click drag on the actual word. So if I left-click drag on the word, it's interactive. Of course, I can click here and I can type a number in, like 0.2. Segments, so fractions the size of the bevel, right? The closer the number is to 1, the bigger the bevel. The closer to 0, the smaller the bevel. And of course, we want segments to be higher. Now you can type in a number like 3, right, to give it some nice roundness there, or you could left-click drag on the word. I actually feel like maybe a 0.25 will be a slightly better bevel size. And that gives us, and remember, you can, at this point, if you ever want to get out of a tool, Q is the quick key for selection. It's also just a great way to turn off whatever tool is your active tool and go to a tool that you really can't screw up anything with. It's your selection tool, right? All you can do is select stuff. And that just gives us a bit of a rounded bed. Now at this point, since I've already done a save scene as to give it our name, I can just hit Control S to save. And now we've got the mattress, right? We've got the mattress. Just a cube, a little bit of scaling to give it some, make it more of a rectangle, select some edges, bevel. Now in this case, I'm going to hold down right mouse button to go back to object mode, right? Remember, you hold down right mouse button, you get your selection types, object mode. And what I want to do is I want to make a bedpost. And we only need to make one single one because we can mirror it over as we've done before. So I'm going to go to Create, Polygon Primitives, Cube, right? Because remember, this particular bedpost, we want it to be fairly squarish. You can kind of see it's fairly squarish with a bit of beveling kind of through most of it, and then it becomes kind of a globe at the top, right? So if you're going to use your own reference image, make sure it has those properties. If not, use this one. Now in this case, our bedpost needs to be over here, so I'll hit W for move, right? I'll grab the blue arrow, move it out. Grab the red arrow, move it over. We'll hit R for scale. I'll scale it down a bit. All right, there we go. All right, then I'm going to scale it up a bit. So remember R for scale, and you'll see I'm kind of I grab the center one to scale all 3 dimensions at the same time. It gets us roughly to about the thickness we want for that. But it needs to be taller, right? So we switch to the green, which is the Y-axis, and we left-click drag on that one to make it about what looks like the height up to the ball. I can hit W again just to move down on the green arrow, and red to move it over a little bit more, maybe move it back on the blue, right, the Z. So remember, you just left drag on kind of these arrows, and that allows you to kind of move around your bedpost, right? So now you can see we've kind of got a decent start for that. It's kind of roughly in the position we want it to be in. So yeah, all right. I think that'll be maybe a good place to stop for this video, and I'll make a second one just so we don't have a super long one. So we're going to do another video for this.